Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of the Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Southwest Virginia fishing report with Matt Reilly. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. Just thawing out from a pretty brutal day on the water.
Yeah, we're actually recording early because you got blown off, right?
Yeah, got a big cold front basically coming through middle of the day today, I guess. We started out, left the house this morning with like 52-degree temps and rain, and by, 2 in the afternoon, it was gusting 40 and 50 and snowing. So big change.
Yeah, it's that Southwest Virginia thing I always say when I come over the mountain to fish for muskie. The temperature is like 15 degrees colder over there than it is in Bedford.
That is correct.
So you are 100% on the muskie train for the most part. It's been kind of funny because we were talking, it was super cold. It's warmed up. It's going to cool off again, and then it's going to warm back up to kind of, I guess, seasonable levels. What are you seeing on the water?
Yeah, like you said, I mean, we had ice in the watershed in a lot of places last week, early last week, mid last week, because we didn't get above freezing for a couple of days. And then basically the weekend through, today, this morning, we'd had some highs in the upper 40s and 50s, close to 60 on Sunday, I think it was. So things were warmed back up pretty quick. Water temps were down around freezing, and certain places were up to like the low to mid 40s again. So it's definitely been changing around a lot. I was, off the water for a couple of days there when it was real cold. And then on dad duty for a couple of days after that. So thankfully, I just got to get back into the swing when things warmed up a bit here.
Yeah, and so when you kind of have that temperature yo-yo, does the cold, when it's super cold and then it warms up, do the fish get a little chasier, or is it just not enough of a movement for long enough for it to really matter?
I mean, I think those big warm-ups are really significant. I mean, like I said, in places we've seen a close to 10-degree swing in the last 4 days or so. And once those fish are in winter mode, those cold fronts usually, you'll have, a day or two where the highs are around freezing or lower. And a couple of real bright bluebird days, some wind, it can make for some really tough fishing. So that'll shut them down for a couple of days sometimes. And then, you get a kind of a warm front coming through, like we've had the last couple of days, with the temp comes back up. We've got some clouds and rains usually associated with those events, and that can be pretty good. I mean, we had a really good day today, despite the challenging conditions. And these are some of those days where you just kind of have to have faith and but still be stoic about muskies being muskies and taking what the river will give you, and being there.
Yeah. And so I guess really kind of what you're saying is they don't really move around once they're in their winter spots, but what that water temperature is doing is it's affecting their metabolism, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, to that end, they did, that big drop in temp that we saw, a week or two ago, certainly has caused a final bit of movement into wintering areas. Whereas, 2 or 3 weeks ago, they were, we still had water temps in the mid 40s in places, and they were a little bit more, loose in the river. Where if I'm fishing now, I'm definitely, limiting my water more so than I was a couple weeks ago.
Got it. And got a question for you from Jason, and he must be musky curious because he wants to get your thoughts on flies to start tying to get into the musky game.
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually just talking to a friend of mine about this the other day because he's doesn't do a lot of musky fishing, but has been wanting to mess around with the flies, and for good reason because it's a lot of fun and they're cool. But I would say, just to kind of keep it simple, to start with, there's a couple. I mean, there's a couple of skill sets that really come into play tying musky flies that you should practice. One, being hollow or reverse tying bucktail is a big one. Learning to tie and learning sort of the concept behind a bulkhead is kind of the genesis of the real popular musky fly, the Buford. Um, those things are worth messing around with. I wouldn't jump straight into like giant, 12-inch, 14-inch bugs just because they're expensive to tie. I mean, you get a lot of reps in doing that, practicing those techniques. But if you wanna turn out a couple of flies, I mean, start with some singles, single Bufords, even things like Brad Bowen's got a fly called an optic minnow. I think it was one of the first flies that tied. Pretty much just saddle, feathers, and a bunch of reverse tied bucktail, and maybe some epoxy head or a fish mask head. And then, there's a couple of synthetic or mostly synthetic flies that I like a lot, that I fish a lot, that are really effective. The Optimus Swine is one that comes into mind pretty quick. That's like a single 5 or 6-aught hook, some synthetic materials, some flash, some feathers, some bucktail, laser dub, eyes, again, kind of standard large streamer, musky materials and processes. And those flies fish pretty well. They're easy to tie. There's several videos out there on the internet about them. Those would probably be my first couple recommendations, just because, a Buford and an Optimus Swine, I mean, fairly easy to tie, pretty simple, and lots of instruction out there for both of those, and they catch fish. So I would start with something like that. And I would say, just as a general point, when you're working with bucktail, it makes a huge difference having quality bucktail, stuff that's, if you're trying to build a body for a fly that's going to kick and glide, do all the stuff you want musky flies to do. Generally speaking, you want some flies with some buoyancy, some flair, when you spin it and tie with it. It's fairly crinkly and not super straight. It just kind of helps create a fuller body. And there's several really good providers of that stuff. My buddy Ellis is a good one. He sells his stuff direct, but also through Tailwaters Fly Co. down in Bluff City. Musky Fool makes some really good stuff. There's some guys up in, I think they're in Canada. I can't remember. High Guys, I think it is. It makes some really good bucktail, but you'll pay for it. But frankly, as expensive as just your standard hairline, like Northern bucktail has gotten, it's worth it. And if you're somebody like me who is going to be really critical about, how the fly turns out and what it looks like and how it feels and all that, you're gonna wanna play with good stuff, and frankly, it's easier to tie with, the higher quality it is. So that's a tip that I would definitely keep in mind. And I actually just put an article out earlier this week with Hatch Magazine that it's kind of along these lines. not really telling anybody what patterns to tie or what materials to use or anything like that, but it's just kind of some really basic sort of design attributes that you want in a musky fly that can, hook, hold, and land a fish. And I make a pretty prominent point in there that you should be creative and you should try different things. So, the other tip is basically just to have fun, mess around with it, do different things. And, musky will eat a lot of stuff. So it's nice to be able to play around and kind of veer off of the recipe a little bit.
Yeah, and then as you kind of fall deeper down the rabbit hole and you start talking about lots of shanks and brushes, do you suggest that people maybe tie large or larger trout streamers to kind of work on the technique so they don't go drop $30 in brushes on a really, really long fly the first time out of the box?
Yeah, I mean, $30 would be maybe on Black Friday or Cyber Monday. But that's not a bad idea at all. And yeah, but I mean, the other side of it is these flies take time to tie, period. No matter, I mean, sometimes I spend just as long on a 4-inch trout streamer as I would a 12-inch musky fly. And people ask me all the time, well, how long does it take you to tie a fly like that? And if I could tie one in an hour, I don't do it because I like to take my time and I want it to turn out well, and I want it to turn into something that I'm going to be excited about fishing. So, I would say to maybe start on the smaller side, but not necessarily. If you're going to invest the time, definitely spend it tying something that you're going to want to fish or be confident in fishing when it does come to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you can spend a small fortune, and we could even really send Jason down the path and tell him to get a brush table and make his own brushes.
Yeah, don't do that. Not yet. It'll suck you in at some point if you're prone to it.
Yeah, it sounded like a good idea at the time, they like to say.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. It'll save you money and time.
You'll save so much money you can buy an extra boat.
Right.
Yeah. So, folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email me or DM me on social media, whatever is easiest for you. And if we use your question, I will send you some articulate fly swag and enter you for a drawing for some cool stuff from Matt. And we're going to this will be our last report of 2024, but we'll draw the first report of 2025. So, we're going to keep doing these. So folks, keep sending in your questions. And, Matt, before I let you go, you want to let folks know kind of what you have available, what you're booking, how to reach out and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah. I've still got some musky days available through, like January, February, mostly February. And then, kind of booking everything. I mean, I've had some folks starting to book, spring smallmouth stuff. I've had summer stuff booked for a long time. Spring striper stuff. We're going to have another periodical cicada hatch to play with this coming spring. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me too. I'll start hitting sort of my inner circle, my regular folks here in the next couple of weeks to make sure we've got our dates on the calendar. So things will start to fill up pretty quick. But like I always say, if there's anything that you're interested in, whether you're actively planning on booking something or not, just reach out and we can have a conversation and figure out what the windows are and how to get done what you're interested in and go from there.
Yeah, and I'll put out my standard Southwest Virginia, Western North Carolina, East Tennessee public service announcement to remind people that it's easy to get to these places again. There are very, very few roads that are still closed post-Helene. All of these communities lost a ton of tourism money in the fall. And so, when you're doing holiday shopping or holiday traveling, I would encourage you to go to these communities and spend money or buy gift certificates or buy gift cards.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so it's going to be a multi-year process, but that's just a little something that people can do. And I just want to say, first of all, I'm going to always encourage you to get out and get on the water, but I also want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Matt.
Merry Christmas, Marvin.